So I'm going to talk right now about cycle counts, C-Y-C-L-E, cycle counts. And a cycle count is where we count the inventory in the building. We don't count it all at once. In the past, people used to count all of the inventory, let's say at one time, all in December, for kind of an end of year. But with a cycle count, you count it a little bit every month. You count some amount this month, some amount next month, and the month after, and eventually you have all your inventory counted over the course of the year, and then you start over the next year. So let's take one particular part, and let's say we have some of these square parts, and let's say we have 4 of them. So there's 4 of them, and that's what we have on the shelf. And I like to call that, I call that actual on hand. I abbreviate it AOH, actual on hand, and we set that is equal to 4. Okay, so but then also we have a computer system, and that's called Oracle, and Oracle sometimes does not have the same count, so I call that Oracle on hand. Oracle on hand. And let's say that Oracle thinks that we have only 3 of those yellow square parts. So then we can do a cycle count report. We run a report from Oracle. We run a cycle count report, and the cycle count report happens to pick yellow squares as something. It happens to tell us that it wants us to count how many yellow squares are there. So we print that report and we go out to the warehouse and we count how many yellow squares we have. And as we just said above, the actual count that we do is going to be 4, assuming we count correct. The count is going to be 4. And then we go back to Oracle and we enter the count. We enter the count and we set the count equal to 4. But what we'll notice here is the on hand, the Oracle on hand, has not yet changed from 3 to 4, even though we entered the count. And the reason for that is the next thing that happens is we do a thing called and this is still in Oracle, so I'll use blue again. We do something called the cycle count adjustment report. Okay, and we take the cycle count adjustment report and we run it, and we run the report. We print it out, and what the cycle count adjustment report would show us is that for the yellow square parts, which have a certain part number, it's going to say that we are short, or actually that we're going to add 1, right? Because our Oracle on hand is 3, but our actual is 4. And we've entered a count of 4, so it's going to say add 1 yellow square. And let's say the yellow squares were worth $50. So it's also going to show, it's going to tell us to add 1, but it's also going to say that the value of that is $50. Now let's say at the same time it had also told us to count another part, so there's some circles that we're counting, and let's say that there's actually the actual on hand for the circles is 6, the purple circles is 6. And the cycle count report has asked us to count those, and that has its own part number as well. But let's say when we did the count for these, we counted only 2 of those. So over here in Oracle, Oracle thinks that we, hold on just a second, I forgot to put this in here. Let's say that our Oracle on hand, Oracle thinks we have say, no, I screwed this all up. I'm gonna erase a little bit of this. I'm gonna just try something out here. I'd really redo this video, but I'm just gonna try it out. Seems how I'm just playing around here. This eraser doesn't work too well. It does work eventually. There's probably a better way to do that too. We'll come back and work on that. Find out how to erase things better later. So we'll take this out of here. We'll come back, and we say that there really are 6, and the actual on hand is 6. And then we're going to do the Oracle. Let's say that Oracle thinks the Oracle on hand. Let's say that Oracle actually thinks we have more of these. Oracle thinks we have 12 of them. So then, just like up here, we did the actual on hand, we have the Oracle on hand, then we do a count. Okay, we created the count, then we do a count. So the count of those, the count is going to be 6, right? And then here, where we do the cycle count adjustment report, once we enter the 6, cycle count adjustment report is going to say we're going to have to subtract 6. We need to subtract 6 from the Oracle on hand to get down to our count. And let's say that these parts were worth $20 each, right? So we're subtracting $120 in those parts. Over here, this was a positive $50, and this is a negative. So Oracle is going to say that the result is that we have negative $70. Negative $70. In those parts, we added some here and subtracted some there, so we have negative 70. But as we noted, the counts haven't changed yet. The Oracle on hand hasn't changed yet. Sorry, the Oracle on hand is still 12, even though it's really 6 of them. The Oracle on hand is 3, even though there's really 4 of them. Why is that? Well, there's still another step to go, and that step is that we send this adjustment report. This whole thing is an adjustment report that tells us how much, what's going up, what's going down, and what the total is. And we send that report to Rick. Okay, send that report to Rick. And Rick takes a look at that, and he says, yep, that's okay, $70 is reasonable, these changes here are reasonable, so he says that's okay. So then we pass it on next to Jay. And Jay takes a look, and let's say Jay also thinks that's a reasonable thing. And so then he does something in Oracle, and remember Oracle is blue. He approves the cycle count. He does an approval. So he goes, yep, go ahead, change those counts. So if we come back up here to our yellow squares, we really have 4 of them for sure, and our count was 4, but our Oracle on hand was only 3. And when Jay approves these reports, that 3 gets changed into a 4. So now the whole point of the cycle count process was that our Oracle on hand is correct. The 4 Oracle on hand is what we really have. And the same thing happens here with these with the circles. I don't have any room left here, but this 12 gets changed. Erase that. Need a better eraser, but okay. And that gets changed when Jay runs the approval. The Oracle on hand for these circles becomes 6. So now that's correct. So that's basically how a cycle count works. That's the easy version of that.